Welcome back. You are listening to the home of forbidden romances. Prepare yourself, because tonight's story will leave you breathless. The gun barrel pressed against Julian's temple was cold, but the blood soaking into his white medical coat was searing hot. Don't move. The command was a guttural growl, wet with fluid rattling in the stranger's lungs, yet vibrating with an authority that nearly brought Julian to his knees. Thunder cracked directly overhead, shaking the foundation of the derelict clinic, illuminating the intruder's face in a flash of strobe light violence. Eyes the color of molten gold, dilated with pain and a terrifying, feral hunger. This wasn't just a man bleeding out on Julian's linoleum floor. This was a predator backed into a corner, and Julian, the foolish underground doctor who had unlocked the door to the storm, was nothing more than a rabbit offering itself up to the wolf. Chapter 1. The Angel in the Gutter. Julian Vane had spent the better part of 5 years making himself invisible. In the hierarchy of this city, Omegas were prized possessions, displayed in gilded cages or bartered for alliances. To avoid that fate, Julian lived in the Shadow District, dousing himself in high-grade, illegal suppressants that made him smell like nothing more than antiseptic and dust. He ran a no-questions-asked clinic for the dregs of society, pickpockets, addicts, and low-level enforcers. He had never expected the Reaper of Onyx City to bleed on his doorstep. The man collapsed a second after the threat, the heavy firearm clattering to the floor. Julian didn't run. He couldn't. The Hippocratic Oath was a shackle he had never quite managed to break, even in the slums. Moreover, the sheer dominance radiating from the unconscious Alpha was suffocating. Even passed out, the man's pheromones were heavy, smelling of burnt cedar, gunpowder, and the metallic tang of impending death. Julian dragged the massive body onto the surgical table with a groan, his slender frame straining against the Alpha's density. He cut away the ruined remnants of a bespoke Italian suit, silk lining, Kevlar weave, revealing a torso sculpted from marble and scarred by violence. There were 3 bullet holes, 2 in the abdomen, 1 grazing the ribs. "You're lucky to be alive, you absolute monster," Julian whispered, his hands steady as he sterilized his instruments. He worked with the efficiency of a mechanic, digging out flattened slugs and stitching torn flesh. As he worked, he noticed the tattoo inked over the man's heart, a black, skeletal hand crushing a crown, the symbol of the Moretti crime syndicate. This was Dante Moretti, the capo, the rumored alpha of alphas who had decimated the Northern Triad in a single night. Julian's hands faltered for a fraction of a second. If Dante died here, the Moretti family would burn this district to the ground looking for answers. If Dante lived, he might kill Julian just to tie up a loose end. "Damned if I do," Julian muttered, tying off the final suture. He hooked up in 4 of fluids and antibiotics, wiping the sweat from his forehead. He stepped back to assess his work. Dante lay still, the harsh overhead lights casting shadows across his sharp jawline and the dark stubble on his cheeks. He was devastatingly handsome in a way that signaled danger, a weapon wrapped in skin. Julian checked the man's temperature, his fingers brushing against Dante's neck. Suddenly, a hand shot up, clamping around Julian's wrist with the force of a hydraulic press. Julian gasped, dropping the thermometer. Dante's eyes snapped open. They weren't hazy with anesthesia, they were lucid, sharp, and fixated on Julian's throat. "Where?" Dante rasped, his voice scraping like sandpaper. "Am I?" "A clinic," Julian managed, trying not to wince at the crushing grip. "Sector 4. You were bleeding out. I saved you." Dante scanned the room without moving his head, his instincts processing threats faster than a computer. He looked back at Julian, his nostrils flaring slightly as he inhaled. A frown marred his brow. "You have no scent," Dante accused, his grip tightening. "Beta." "Yes," Julian lied smoothly. It was a lie practiced 1,000 times. "Now let go, or you'll tear your stitches." Dante stared at him for a long, agonizing moment before releasing his wrist. He tried to sit up, but a groan of agony forced him back down. "Do not move," Julian ordered, finding his doctor's voice. "You lost 2 pints of blood. You have internal trauma. If you move, you die, and my hard work goes to waste." Dante let out a dark, dry chuckle. "And we wouldn't want to waste the time of a gutter doctor, would we?" I prefer freelance trauma surgeon, Julian corrected, checking the foreline. Why haven't you called your men? A man like you has a retrieval team. Dante's expression shuddered, turning cold and impenetrable. Because the bullet that hit my gut came from my own detail. I can't trust the hospitals, and I can't trust my phone. Julian froze. A coup. The most dangerous time in any criminal empire. So, I'm stuck with you, Julian concluded, feeling a headache forming behind his eyes. Until I can walk, Dante confirmed, closing his eyes. If you betray me, doctor, I will peel the skin from your bones. Charming, Julian deadpanned, turning off the main light. Try to sleep. I'll be in the next room. Chapter 2. The Lion in the Living Room. 3 days passed. The tension in the small clinic was thick enough to choke on. Dante Moretti healed with unnatural speed, a hallmark of his high-tier alpha genetics. By the second day, he was pacing the small recovery room like a caged tiger. By the third, he had taken over Julian's small living quarters above the clinic. Julian found himself in a bizarre domestic arrangement with a mass murderer. He brought Dante food. Dante critiqued the lack of protein. He changed Dante's bandages. Dante watched him with an intensity that made Julian's skin prickle. The problem was the suppressants. Julian's supply was running low, and the stress of harboring a fugitive was making his biology volatile. You're trembling, Dante noted from the worn-out sofa, watching Julian pour tea. Caffeine withdrawal, Julian lied, placing the cup down. He kept his distance. Being this close to a potent alpha was making his inner omega restless. His instincts were screaming at him to submit, to bare his neck, to seek comfort from the powerful male in the room. It was biological treason. Dante reached out, not for the tea, but to catch Julian's hand. He pulled him closer, his nose brushing the pulse point of Julian's wrist. You smell like chemicals, Dante murmured, his voice low and vibrating through Julian's bones. Beneath that, something else. Sweet. Julian yanked his hand away, his heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his ribs. It's the antiseptic. I bathe in it. Dante's eyes narrowed. You're hiding something, doctor. I don't like secrets. And I don't like fugitives eating my meager supply of eggs. But here we are, Julian snapped, deflection being his only defense. Dante smirked, a genuine expression that transformed his face from terrifying to devastatingly attractive. You have a sharp tongue for a beta. Most people cower when I look at them. I've seen your insides, Mr. Moretti. It ruins the mystique. Dante, the alpha corrected. Call me Dante. The air shifted. It became heavier, charged with static. The use of the first name was an invitation, an intimacy that Julian couldn't afford. I have patients downstairs, Julian said breathlessly, retreating toward the door. Go. Dante dismissed him, leaning back. But don't think I'm not watching you, Julian. Julian fled to the safety of the clinic, locking the door behind him. He leaned against the cool metal, gasping for air. He checked his pocket for his pill case. Only 2 left. He needed a refill from his contact, but leaving Dante alone was a risk. If the traitorous faction of the Moretti family found him, they would kill everyone inside. Chapter 3. The Breaking Point. The attack came at midnight on the 4th day. It started with the shattering of glass. A Molotov cocktail smashed through the front window of the clinic, engulfing the waiting room in flames. Julian woke to the sound of gunfire and the roar of the fire. He scrambled out of bed, grabbing his emergency bag, but Dante was already there. Ideally, an injured man should be limping. Dante was moving like a specter of death, a silenced pistol in each hand. Weapons he must have had taped under the sink or hidden in the floorboards. They found us, Dante said calmly, kicking the door open. Move. Out the back. My patient's records. Leave them, Dante roared, grabbing Julian by the nape of his neck and shoving him toward the rear exit. Bullets chewed through the drywall, sending plumes of white dust into the air. Dante returned fire with terrifying precision, double-tapping shadows in the smoke. They burst out into the rain-slicked alleyway. Black SUVs blocked the ends of the street. Men in tactical gear were swarming. We can't go through them, Dante growled. He looked at Julian, seeing the terror in the smaller man's eyes. For a split second, the ruthlessness softened. Trust me. Dante holstered one gun and wrapped an arm around Julian's waist, hoisting him off the ground effortlessly. He ran, not away from the cars, but toward a chain-link fence topped with razor wire. With a surge of alpha strength, Dante threw his coat over the wire, vaulted up, and pulled Julian over with him. They hit the concrete on the other side, jarring Julian's teeth. They were in the labyrinth of the old industrial sewers. "Run," Dante commanded. They ran for what felt like hours, navigating the dark, damp tunnels until the sounds of pursuit faded. They emerged near the docks. In a safe house Dante kept off the books, a rusted shipping container converted into a panic room. Once inside, Dante secured the heavy steel door. The adrenaline crash hit Julian like a physical blow. He slid down the wall, his chest heaving. But something was wrong. The heat. It wasn't just the exertion. A cramp seized Julian's abdomen, so painful he cried out. The stress, the physical exertion, and the overwhelming presence of Dante's aggressive pheromones had burned through the last of his suppressants. The chemical mask shattered. The scent hit the small, enclosed space instantly. It wasn't antiseptic anymore. It was lilac, honey, and rain, a scent so potent, so undeniably omega, that it made the air taste like sugar. Dante froze. He turned slowly, his golden eyes widening, the pupils blowing wide until there was almost no iris left. "Julian," Dante whispered, the name sounding like a prayer and a curse. Julian curled into a ball, whimpering. The heat was upon him, violent and demanding. His body was preparing for a mate, slick and desperate. "Stay back," Julian gasped, though his body was betraying him, reaching out toward the alpha. Dante approached him, not like a man, but like a beast stalking its prey. He dropped to his knees between Julian's spread legs. He didn't touch him yet. He just inhaled, drinking in the scent that had been hidden from him. "You lied," Dante growled, his voice thick with lust. "An omega. And bonded, unclaimed omega. I had to." Julian sobbed, the fever taking his mind. "I didn't want to be a slave." Dante's expression twisted. Rage warred with desire. "Do you think I would enslave you? You're a monster," Julian whispered. "I am," Dante agreed, his hand cupping Julian's fever-hot cheek. "But I am your monster." The declaration snapped something in the air. Biology took the wheel. Dante's control, already frayed by the gunfight, disintegrated. "Please," Julian begged, no longer sure what he was asking for. Relief? Mercy? Him? "Tell me to stop," Dante warned, his thumb brushing over Julian's trembling lip. "Tell me to stop, and I will walk out that door and let the fever burn you alive. But if you let me stay, I will never let you go. You will be mine, Julian." In every way a person can belong to another. Julian looked up into those golden eyes. He saw the violence, yes, but he also saw a fierce, terrifying protectiveness. He saw a man who would burn the world to keep him safe. "Don't go," Julian breathed. Dante didn't need to be told twice. He crashed his lips against Julian's, a kiss that tasted of blood and devotion. Clothes were torn away in a frenzy. The cold metal floor of the container became their altar. When Dante finally claimed him, nodding deep inside, Julian felt the world narrow down to a single point of pleasure. And when Dante's teeth grazed the mating gland on Julian's neck, Julian didn't pull away. He bared his throat. The bite was sharp, agonizing, and ecstatic. The venom flooded Julian's system, binding their souls together, weaving their scents into a permanent tapestry. The Reaper had claimed his angel. Chapter 4. The Rise of the Queen. The morning sun filtered through the cracks of the shipping container. Julian woke wrapped in Dante's massive coat, his body aching, his neck throbbing where the mark of the Moretti clan was now scar tissue. Dante was sitting by the door, cleaning his gun. He looked up the moment Julian stirred. The feral hunger was gone, replaced by a possessive calmness. "How do you feel?" Dante asked. "Like I got hit by a truck," Julian croaked. Dante moved instantly, bringing a bottle of water to Julian's lips. "Drink." Julian drank, watching Dante over the rim of the bottle. Everything had changed. He could feel Dante's emotions, a low hum of satisfaction and alertness, in the back of his mind. The mating bond. "What now?" Julian asked, lowering the bottle. "Now," Dante said, standing up and checking the magazine of his pistol. "I take back my city, and I introduce them to my consort. I didn't sign up for the Mafia life, Dante. You signed up for me," Dante corrected, leaning down to kiss Julian's forehead. The rest is collateral. The reclamation of Onyx City was bloody and swift. With his Omega secured and bonded, Dante fought with a renewed, terrifying vigor. The traitors were hunted down. The rival gangs were crushed. Julian didn't return to the shadows. He couldn't. He stood by Dante's side, the only person capable of calming the Reaper's rage. He reopened his clinic, but this time, it was a state-of-the-art facility funded by Moretti money, protected by the fiercest enforcers in the city. Epilogue, 6 months later. The rain lashed against the panoramic windows of the Moretti penthouse, far above the grime of the Shadow District. Julian stood by the glass, looking out over the city lights. He rested a hand on the swell of his stomach, visible beneath his silk robe. The impossible had happened. The biology of a male Omega was rare, the conception even rarer, but the bond with an alpha of Dante's caliber had triggered nature's oldest miracle. The door opened. Dante entered, smelling of cold air and expensive scotch. He shed his suit jacket, tossing it onto a chair, and crossed the room to wrap his arms around Julian from behind. His large hands came to rest over Julian's, cradling the life growing inside. Kicking? Dante asked, his voice a low rumble against Julian's ear. He's restless tonight. Julian smiled, leaning back into his alpha's warmth. Like his father, Dante buried his face in the crook of Julian's neck, inhaling the scent that was now inextricably mixed with his own. He knows he's safe. He knows he's royalty. Julian turned in Dante's arms, looking up at the man who had once been a bleeding stranger on his floor. The ruthlessness was still there in the sharp lines of Dante's face, but it was tempered now, directed outward at the world, a shield for the family they had built. You destroyed my life, you know, Julian teased softly. I like my anonymity. I didn't destroy it, Dante replied, kissing him deeply, his hand tightening possessively over the baby bump. I elevated it. You were always meant to rule, Julian. I just gave you the throne. Julian sighed, surrendering to the embrace. The storm raged outside, but in here, in the arms of the beast he had healed, there was only peace. And that is how the Reaper tamed the angel, and how the angel gave the Reaper a reason to live. If you enjoyed seeing Julian bring the Mafia King to his knees, destroy that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you forgive a man who kidnapped you, even if it was to save your life? I'll be reading your answers. Subscribe for the next chapter. Until then, prompt image. Prompt. Masterpiece, best quality, high-res, 1.2. Korean manhwa style, semi-realistic, digital art, 2 men, BL, Yaoi, man 1. Tall muscular alpha, sharp jawline, short black hair, golden eyes, wearing unbuttoned black dress shirt, tattoos visible on chest, protective pose, hand on other man's stomach. Man 2. Smaller slender male Omega, silver hair, soft features, wearing silk robe, visible baby bump, leaning back into man 1. Expression of contentment. Background is a luxury penthouse at night with rain on floor-to-ceiling windows, city lights bouquet, warm interior lighting, romantic and dramatic atmosphere, cinematic composition, intricate details.